Fáilte. Welcome back to another episode of Crann Short Stories and Poetry. I'm Terrance Ó Domhnaill, your village scéalaí, returning again this week with more stories and poems from authors around the world. I have 3 more stories this week for this half-hour show. I'm beginning with the continuation of the serialized space operas from my Substack writers, the Guardians and the Gravediggers of Orpheus. My 3rd story is a fable from Africa, a wonderful story about a hippo published by a medium writer. So gather around once more and let me read to you under the shade of the crown of beatha, the tree of life. And my first chapter here is called Broken No More. Again, the serialized story of the Guardians. The author is the Black Knight. This is chapter 3. The shuttle pilot skillfully navigated this laden with supplies vessel through the atmo. Wings burning, engines bellowed hot streams of plasma. Soon the spacecraft's landing struts touched the soil. Across the mega concrete landing pad ran Shimazu techs, and quickly, efficiently, they checked the ship's hull for damage. The wide, long transport shuttle's loading ramp lowered, and the 2 Terrans hastily strolled out of the cargo management team's way. Joined they were by the craft's pilot, who leapt out of the cockpit's emergency hatch, duffel bag in hand. Daughter of Spacer Clan Smelchuk, this young woman was adamant she'd help Shimazu relief and reconstruction efforts. She waved at Einar and Holden before dashing towards the main castle building. The girl hadn't even started her first husband search. We're finally here. Einar stretched his long limbs, shouldered his shield using its back foam sling, and picked up the now much smaller duffel bag. Lotharia, you are broken no more. Your degenerate overlords and their underlings crushed. Your once tortured, disease-stricken, and dying of hunger people are now free. Half-cape fluttering in the hot Lotharian wind, face showered by scorching sun rays, Holden nevertheless smiled, and after he elbowed Einar's leg, added, "It is our duty to teach the freed how to remain such." The Asgardian warrior checked if his sword was easily unsheathed, and smiled in response. After he noticed the many marching, training Lotharian volunteers in the near distance, Einar stated, "That and make sure that anyone not of Lotharia, alien filth who brazenly assume they can come here and do whatever, get their vile dreams utterly crushed." Both stood there beside the landing pad away from the cargo loaders, whose female pilots rapidly unloaded container after container. The brand new structure was built some months ago and already seen much use. Castle Mizuyama was named by Shimazu elders after what local Lotharian called this area Water Mountain. Indeed, there were many springs in the area, which soon attracted the attention of engineers. They hastily built sturdy pipelines and brought clean water to many a distant village. People who were taxed for water in their fields or barely had any good drinking water now understood what plenty was. Back in the day when debased lords and degenerate priests ruled over Lotharia, these springs were kept. Guarded by fanatical temple-let, these butchers murdered any peon, killed any serf who dared sneak even a bucket of water. Humans had no love for enslavers. Them, and by that matter, any other type of authoritarian slime. Suffice to say, the Japanese engineers and their helpers sent plenty of angry links to certain people back on Earth. Many more Terrans, hundreds of thousands, arrived on Lotharia. The industrious retainers of Clan Shimazu weren't the only ones whose noble human blood boiled. Their very soul burned with furious purpose and want, the iron determination to transfer crushed peons and abused serfs into freedom-loving people. Holder and Einar were to join this legion of trainers, teachers, and builders, lend their helping hand. Aid they would provide, and a plenty, though not by way of spray or crafting tool, but with sword and railgun. The presence of a morale officer meant that many more alive would be saved, and spirits emboldened. Armaments failed, flesh faltered, breath was finite, and blood eventually ran dry. People's minds touched by the Terran word, however, they become indomitable. One could no longer scare them, for Terrans learned them how to fear and even embrace terror. Caressed gently, tucked deep within their very hearts, was an overwhelming horror of the future full of endless servitude. The fright which all Lotharian parents, now having experienced real freedom, they would never wish any form of slavery to visit their progeny. Having seen enough, Einar and Holden walked across the courtyard, their goal to reach the castle commandant's office. This was the place where all adventurous Terrans visited shortly after they landed on Lithoria. Coordinating the relief efforts, there worked multiple staff officers, many of whom part of Clan Shimazu's reserves. These people had many decades of experience and knew well how to direct scant, combat-capable resources where these would be most useful. Freed from needless tax burden and molestation, locals had restored many a farm, and with plenty of water flowing from the pipes, things looked rather promising. With basic foodstuffs in steadily increasing quantities and enough drinking water, at least hunger or thirst weren't immediate concerns. Holden and Einar saluted the guard, showed their phalanx recruitment holo tickets, and then the young morale officer attempted to enter. So full with people was the building that even his athletic companion experienced great trouble. Justly, he was given right of passage. To delay any office-mandated operation meant losing precious lives. Terrance and Star Alliance, everyone let Holden move ahead. Many of them had either seen morale officers on the field or had the incredible luck of fighting beside one. As Guardian Warrior threw one long look inside and decided not to follow. He wasn't a fully grown man, yet him being 13 feet tall, avoiding unfortunate accidents inside this overcrowded building would be a virtual impossibility. Therefore, Einar stood before the office building, and due to his tall stature, his gaze easily noticed one group of newly arrived Lithorians. They were dressed in raggedy clothing, wore torn sandals or none at all, yet seemed to be in high spirits. Echoing in the distance, he could hear the voices of 4 Shimazu drill sergeants addressing the crowd. An understandable local dialect of French speak, the instructors explained what was about to happen and what was expected of the volunteers. The men would receive new clothing, uniforms, and boots. They were to bathe, get medical attention, eat, receive training schedule for the next day, and then sleep. Confused silence followed immediately after all drill instructors finished speaking. For a moment, Einar assumed that the Japanese accent and pronunciation made the sergeant's words hard to understand. That was not the case, however. One young Lithorian raised his hand, stepped forward, and after perfectly replicating the Terran soldier salute, asked, "Can we start? Can we train today?" The master sergeant attempted to explain. Indeed, he did try and as best he could, but his well-articulated words were met with stubborn, determined gazes. After his statement that this was what all trainees were supposed to do on their first day, that this was military regulations, another Lithorian raised his hand. This one's feet were bare, covered with crusted blood and sand. Nevertheless, this man still marched forward and stated, "We quick ran through desert for many days and without rest. Hurry lots and came here to learn Terran soldier. Did we do something wrong?" Einar could see how the face of that Japanese drill instructor twitched, how the man's body shook and his fists clenched. Asgardian lost his breath for a short time after that resolute declaration. He could only imagine how hard it was for that human. After all, he had to face hundreds of looks, gaze at so many unflinching faces. Even from this distance, Einar could physically feel the volunteers' iron determination. The sergeant inhaled slowly and answered, somehow still able to keep his professional composure. "No, you did nothing wrong." The other 3 drill instructors shared looks, and then, after a couple of short words, all spoke in Japanese, their commander conceded. "You will do all we command, learn what we teach, and that means rest, too. However, since you are so eager to start training, we will begin immediately after every single one of you has been outfitted. Then there will be a long rest. Company attention! Face right, left foot, forward, march." Holden joined him just in time to see the raggedy-looking Lithorian volunteers marching semi-successfully across the courtyard towards the huge barracks. The long, well-wrapped item which his companion held made an immediate impression. Moreover, when the morale officer looked at said item, reverence shone in his eyes. Einar was positive that this would only be a battle flag given to Holden either as part of their mission gear allotment or he could imagine only one other purpose behind giving a banner to morale officers. "From the look on your face and gleam in your eye, I could reasonably assume that this is a flag?" Einar now knew that his companion valued the direct approach, and instead of deliberating in his head, asked, Yes, this is one of their newly created banners. They have entrusted it to us, together with one full platoon of Lothorians. Look, Ener, they should be marching out of the barracks now. Holden shouldered the banner and looked at the barracks, waiting to see any properly outfitted soldiers marching toward them in good order. Ener gave the banner another look. Still in its waterproof vacuum cover, no details were visible, except the fact that it was attached to a long spear. Long with a wide, forged from mega steel tip, the weapon's shaft was made from local wood, encased in industrial-grade lacquer. While he pondered how would this banner look fluttering in the wind, the stomp of boots garnered his attention. Rapidly forming out of the massive castle barracks came running in full gear the aforementioned platoon. Dressed in the now signature for all Lothorian infantrymen gray and blue uniforms, these soldiers had brand-new Arasaka Type 300 rifles slung over their shoulders. Belts made from sturdy Epes leather, everyone had plenty of spare power packs and a couple of hand grenades. The sheath of their rifle's long vibro bayonet was on their left, and a folded shovel on their right thigh. Backpacks manufactured from vac-foam and not on this planet stuck a bit over their broad shoulders. The Commandant had a mission for us, my friend. Holden still clutched the flag. His eyes trailed the quickly assembling troopers, and then he looked at Ener's face. We are to march across the mountain pass, reach the other side where a small village of strategic importance has been beset by all sorts of attacks. Bandit-let, debased priests of Rot, and cartel remnants had all joined forces to prey upon these distant, oftentimes completely helpless villages. We are to reinforce the defenses of said village and make sure that none of its tortured residents suffer any harm. Then, after reinforcements arrive, locate the armed camp of those Rot loyalists and their alien helpers and proceed to utterly annihilate them. A vicious smile blossomed on Ener's face. Hand on his holster, he imagines himself mowing down scores of debased narcos and slaughtering the Let. He'd never dirty the blade of his sword by cutting down a priest of Rot, however. By way of fist, boot, or simply lobbing big rocks from afar should these vermin be dealt with. Lothorian feet marched towards them, wearing incredibly sturdy, crafted from vac-foam and reinforced with mega-steel tall boots. The rifle platoon had one heavy weapon team. The corporal in command strode next to his laden with spare ammo 4 soldiers, who carried their Browning auto railgun together. Kepis worn slightly fixed to the right. Lothorian soldiers marched quickly until they were halted by their sergeant. Standing at attention before them, all troopers looked perfectly healthy, well-fed, and their feet steady. They held the slings of their rifles as one should expect of any trained Japanese regular. Everything on their belt was arranged as it should be, spare munitions and grenades easy to reach, bayonet safety latch on. Holden, as written in the morale officer's handbook, stood at attention, then removed the flag's cover. A helpful gust of hot wind fully extended the beautiful banner, and it fluttered mightily, for all eyes to marvel upon its exquisite craftsmanship. Blue in color, the national flag of the Lothorian monarchy had a golden ankh at its center. The mighty sharp claws of an Egyptian hawk rested upon this ankh, and the bird's wings were spread, ready for flight. This central composition was surrounded by a blood-red semicircle in which 11 white stars were embroidered. Each signified one of the original crewmates of IMS Starshatter, the Terrans who first led freed Lothorians into life-saving battle. Under the ankh, everyone could see the crossed Kopish sword and eagle rifle. The flag's long fingers were dark green and moved like young neck-toothed stems, stirred by the spring wind. Soldiers, your training is complete. Armed and outfitted, well supplied, now you are the protectors of your friends and families. His serious-born companion made a short, very morale officer pause before continuing. Together we will march. Holden's free hand pointed at the mountain's snowy peak, over the mountain and far away. His mega-steel-plated, office-issued, hobnailed boots stomped the courtyard hard before Holden shouted, "There are leftovers of your degenerate overlord slinker still, and suckle Lothoria's lifeblood. Together we will fight them, and together," the morale officer's glove now pointed at Ener, "we will undoubtedly crush these parasites." One powerful, ear-splitting shout left 50 throats. This was the rebel yell which Ener had read much about. Only now did the Asgardian notice that the platoon's commander was not a full lieutenant, but a veteran sergeant from the 1st Lothorian Rifles. The man's neck was scarred and his face stern, yet there was a hopeful gleam in his eyes. Right hand held the vac-foam sling of a heavy, older model air-socket rifle, the Type R-10. This was a beastly weapon, cumbersome and designed for trench warfare, yet this veteran carried it with a confident smirk. Enor's brow twitched. He noticed that not only that sergeant, but his entire platoon wore upon their faces the now familiar to him serious smile. My next story is Chapter 5 of the Gravediggers of Orpheus. "Hold on, we're going down," Derek shouted, holding the steering wheel steady. The last few minutes had passed like a feverish nightmare. They had been rammed by a ghoul patrol ship. The ghouls that would not respond to the vulture's attempts to communicate. The dispatch couldn't help either. "Nobody attacks the gravedigger ships, idiots! Can't they see we're registered gravediggers?" Derek had screamed while steering the old vessel away from the government's ghoul ship. If anybody, Derek could manage to save them from the attack. He was a top-notch pilot. He couldn't avoid the ghouls' missiles. Vulture 05 was too slow to maneuver. Derek did his best, but a blast hit the back of the ship, shaking it to the core. "We're going down!" Derek yelled, looking back. His team was tucked into their seats with safety belts, but what about Doc, Liz, and the survivors? No time to think. Derek steered the ship to an emergency landing. "Impact in 3, 2, 1, he bellowed. He banged his head against the wheel from the ferocious impact. The red emergency lights blinked when he opened his eyes. "You all right, Cap?" Joe, one of the gravediggers, shook him. "The bots isolated the fire, but we ain't flying today." "Yeah, must have passed out." Derek turned to see his crew. Joe was a big guy. He seemed fine, but what about the rest? "The baby," Derek explained when he saw the guys were all right. All got out of their seats and ran down the black and red blinking hallways. The doors kept swishing. Derek himself rammed the one stuck from the impact. Nothing could stand in his way. "Liz, you okay? The baby, Sophie!" Derek cried out at the sight of the ship's physician. He hugged her without a word. "We're all good. I got them to the operation room and fastened them into med beds." "Thank you," Derek blurted and ran past her into the operation room. The baby, howling and wailing, was safely fastened in an incubator box. Sophie by her side, strapped to a med bed. He rushed to baby Anouk and took her out of the glass box. The little one calmed down instantly. It's okay. Derek held Anouk close to his heart. He sat down on the side of Sophie's bed. "What was that, Captain?" "The ghouls attacked us for no reason. Must have been some glitch in their system," Derek murmured, and looked down at the baby, yet again blushing. He was the captain. Why was he acting like a shy schoolboy? "You're bleeding." Sophie touched his forehead. Derek looked into her eyes, but he couldn't say anything. Even the impact of his ship hitting the ground didn't make his heart pound as hard as Sophie's touch. Doc Liz entered. "Come, Captain, let's take care of you." "It's nothing, Liz. Come on. No one on this ship will be left bleeding as long as I'm alive." Derek wouldn't dare to disobey the gray Doc. He gave baby Anouk to her mama and followed Doc. "I don't think it's just a glitch, Cap, the attack," she said, whilst taking care of Derek's wound in the operation room, too. "What else could it be, Liz? The ghouls are idiots." "No, I hate to say it, but I have my suspicions. It's about Sophie." "What are you saying?" Derek frowned. So now I'm going to take a break, and let me bring you the third story after a couple of minutes. So listen to this little advertisement here about my stuff, and I'll be back in a couple of minutes. During this break, I wish to ask for a donation of any amount to help me keep this podcast going. I'm fine with whatever you can afford, using whatever currency you want. I have set up a donation tab on the Crann Stories and Poetry webpage at rss.com and a donation page on my website at www.crannabihah.com using PayPal for your security. Don't worry about the exchange rates, as PayPal takes care of that for us. If you like this podcast, please like, subscribe, and share it with everyone you know in your social circles, as the writers I showcase in this podcast deserve all the exposure they can get. I created this podcast for them because I love to read their work, and I believe it should be shared with the whole world. Now I want to explain how to find my website. Since this show is audio only, just write down the website name from the podcast image showing here and search for it. Visitors finding the website for the first time will reach the welcome page to learn a little bit about what's inside. You'll see the homepage link at the bottom of the page. Click on it if you wish to enter my world. Once on the homepage, you'll see the menu bar at the top where there are links to the pages in the website. Feel free to look around all you want. If you should happen to buy one of my books, all the better. Thank you for your support. Welcome back. So let me finish up today with this last story, a fable from Africa, The Legend of the Magic Water Lilies by Jojo Tekena, published in Imogene's Notebook. Way down deep in the heart of Zambia, a country far, far away in Africa, is the languid Lungwa River with the most beautiful hippopotamuses you've ever seen. They're gorgeous, shiny mounds that sparkle in the water and scare off those great, greasy crocodiles that slink along the shore and lick their chops at the little children that pass by on the safari cruise boats. William and his mother were the newest family of hippos to join the lower river now that the rains were over, and they were welcomed into the lesser Lungwa bloat. That's what you call a group of hippos, you know. But Uncle Masengi, a big male hippopotamus, came over to them and issued a warning. Welcome to the Lungwa bloat. We're happy to host you here until the next season. However, I must warn you about some of your surroundings. William's mother listened closely. There are many tasty reeds and water plants that you can eat along the banks of the river, but you should know about the Carulian nymphea. The what now? William's mother asked carefully. She didn't want to make Uncle Masengi mad by not paying attention to his rules. William, on the other hand, was preoccupied by frogs and lizards playing on the bank of the river and by the gooey green mud that looked so inviting next to that bumpy log he saw rolling gently back and forth. Uncle Masengi smiled indulgently. The blue water lily, Carulian nymphae. Some biologists or botanists or other sorts of American scientists were here last summer studying them. That's what the humans called them anyway. Those flowers migrated here all the way from the Nile thousands of years ago. Are they dangerous? She hesitantly asked. Oh, yes. You don't want to know what will happen if you eat them. Masengi made a choking motion and rolled his eyes. They're deadly. Don't be tempted by the delicate petals or sweet aroma. The legend of the blue water lilies has come down through the years as the only hard and fast rule in the lesser Lungwa bloat. If you don't push past that one, we will all get along well. Has anyone ever eaten them before? I think our Malengo's great-grandmother was the last one that ate the blue flowers, and she disappeared after a week, and no one ever saw her again. So they must be poisonous. None of the river animals have ever eaten them either. William's mother and Uncle Masengi talked a little more, and then he sank in a pool of bubbles and left them to graze along the banks of a slow-moving satin ribbon of river that wound its way through the golden green grass of the river bottom. Did you hear that, William? Mother asked. William nodded absently as he looked longingly at the green mud on the bank of the river. Don't eat the special flowers, right, Mama? He knew the bumpy log was actually a crocodile, and the mud was off limits. Yes, William. Don't eat or even look at the blue water lilies. That's the only rule we have to abide by in order to be a part of the lesser Lungwa bloat. We are foreigners here, and as such we must behave. She smiled at her son as they settled in the warm water for the night. William snuggled up to his mother and dreamed about logs that turned into crocodiles and beautiful blue flowers that beckoned from afar. The wild African stars floated overhead, while the red-chested bee-eaters dug their nest on the banks of the river for next season's eggs. The next few weeks were sweet and slow, and flowed like honey down the shores of the Lungwa River. William made friends with Tendai and Mwamba. They would show off for the safari boats that hosted the curious people that would peer from the edge with binoculars. Tendai blew bubbles. William slapped his tail on the water, and Mwamba opened his mouth wide to show off his newly grown tusks. Sometimes the people would toss tasty fruits to them. Mwamba ate everything and grew fast. He never shared. Look at my big teeth. I will chomp you if you fall out of that boat. Mwamba would laugh and clack his jaws together. The people in the boats would gasp and lean further over the edge. Mwamba caught the fruit and sometimes gave some to his brother, but never to William. William was little, and the big boys wouldn't play with him much. That made him sad and lonely. He wanted some fruit from the boat people, too. It felt like he wasn't very special. William went off by himself to pout, as his mother was often busy or preoccupied with the other ladies of the river. She had made friends and fit in well with the big group. They would be crowded in a circle, chewing on river grass and talking loudly. He heard her laugh and knew she wouldn't care where he was. Oh, how he wanted to go burrowing in the gray-green mud behind the crocodiles, but they never moved, even though he knew they were watching him with hungry eyes. "Hey, kid," one big, greasy crocodile hissed in a soft voice. "I'm not allowed to talk to you." William turned his back. "That's okay. Don't talk. Just listen. I heard your mama talking to Misenge the other day. He was telling her all about the blue lilies, but he left out part of the story, right? He forgot to say that those are magic lilies." "I'd eat 'em myself, but I'm not a veggie fan, if you know what I mean." The crocodile grunted in great heaves of laughter, one golden eye above the water winking at William. "Magic lilies?" William turned an inch closer. "Yep. I've heard that if you eat one, your heart's greatest wish will come true. Can you believe that? Man, that would be something, wouldn't it?" The big crocodile slid slowly away and looked back at William with a knowing glint in his eye. "Saw a patch of them just last week over by the deep water. A whole pile. They smelled so good. Tasty." Then he disappeared beneath the water. William sniffed the air, hoping to smell the magic lilies. "I wish I was special," he said out loud. No one was listening, though. He moped and grumbled and stomped his feet on the muddy bottom of the river. Mama wasn't paying attention. The big boys weren't sharing, and even his father had sent William and his mother away when the rain stopped. Nobody thought he was special. A new and dangerous idea bloomed in William's small gray chest. One night, not too far from then, William made up his mind. He desperately wanted to wish for his heart's desire, even though he really wasn't sure what that was. However, he was sure he was sad and lonely enough to risk dying to accomplish it, even though death wasn't a concept he was old enough to really understand. He snuck back through the black water, leaving his mother with her nostrils blowing bubbles at the surface of the sleeping river. Rounding the corner past a crocodile snoring on the bank, he crept further into the dark night. Past the gray-green mud, past the papyrus reeds, he slunk between the slippery tadpole grounds. Just beyond the watering hole where the elephants would drink their fill, he smelled it. The most delectable heavenly scent he'd ever put his nose on. The thick mat of blue water lilies glowed in the moonlight and smelled like sugar-dipped violets. William's mouth watered. "I'll take just one small bite. No one will ever know," he thought, as he waded closer to the floating patch of lilies. William slowly took a whole flower in his mouth and held it. Was he sure what he was doing was right? No, he knew this was against the rules. He was more worried about what his mother would say than Uncle Misenge. But at this point he didn't really care. He sighed and closed his eyes, making his heart's deepest wish. "Dear magic lilies, I wish I was special in a way no one else will ever be. I want everyone to envy me, and I want to do something they will never do." He slowly chewed the flower up, swallowed it, and waited. Nothing happened, but the flower was delicious. So delicious, in fact, he ate up the entire patch, noisily chomping and sloshing around in the still river like the rambunctious calf he was. After a few minutes of stuffing himself with these amazingly tasty blue flowers, he stopped. Would he be dead soon? He counted all his toes, wiggled his ears and tail, and opened and closed his mouth. Nothing hurt, and his tummy was fine. William laughed. "Uncle Misenge is a fool. What does that old geezer know?" thought William. He quickly swam back through the watering hole, avoiding the crocodile nest, and snuggled back under his mother's comforting bulk for a good long sleep until the next morning. "Oh, William, what have you done?" His mother looked at him with fearful, condemning eyes and backed away slowly. "What do you mean, Mama?" William awoke and shook the sleep out of his ears. He stretched and yawned and stood up in the shallow pool of reeds they had slept in. He smiled, remembering the blue lilies and how tasty they were. Her eyes had grown cold. She hovered near the rest of the herd, staring at William. Uncle Misenge charged to the front and pushed the rest of the group behind him. He looked at William in disgust. "Boy, you have shamed us all. Look what you've become. Have you seen yourself?" William was startled and frightened. "No, I don't know what you mean." "Come to the edge of the river and look in. Then you'll see what everyone else can see. Your disobedience and shame are written all over you." William climbed out of the river and ran to the edge of a taller bank over the reflecting pool. He looked down at his reflection and gasped. He was a beautiful, rich shade of royal blue. From head to foot, ears to tail, he was blue all over. He opened his mouth, and even his tongue was blue. William shivered and then smiled. He was special. His wish had come true. His smile faltered a bit as he saw his mother sobbing and the other hippos drawing her away. Musenge comforted her with chilling words. Perhaps you can have a new calf next year. Best to leave this one to the crocodiles. Then Musenge turned and faced William, opened his great gaping mouth to bare his deadly tusks. You broke the rules. You ate the flowers, didn't you? You are no longer part of us. You'll bring too much attention, and the lesser Lungwa bloat doesn't want you. You are banished to the far end of the river. You no longer have a family. Get moving now. William hung his head, tears dripping out of his eyes. How did this happen? He had just wanted to taste the flowers. He had only wanted to have his wish come true. He never wanted to hurt his mother or leave his family. Maybe Musenge was right. He slowly slid into the water and swam upstream, past the gray-green mud. All the frogs and lizards and even the crocodiles were silent as he passed, except one. I guess no one can love a blue hippopotamus, the golden isle crocodile hissed at him and smiled. I could take all your pain away. Just swim a little closer. But William refused and kept swimming, his brilliant blue head sticking out of the water. The crocodile shrugged. I'll be around if you need me. Just then a large safari cruise boat came chugging down the river toward the hippo's territory. A man with a megaphone stood and explained to the tourists about the Lungwa River and how there were more hippos here than any place in the world. But then he stopped and looked at William. Wow, a blue hippopotamus! One little girl yelled and pointed. William was frightened, but then he came closer, and the girl tossed him a melon from the boat. William opened his mouth wide, and everyone gasped at the bright blue mouth and tongue. The man with the megaphone was dancing all around and using his cell phone. You have to come see this. The university will want to study him, maybe even somewhere in Lusaka. He's only a baby and worth a fortune. Yes, he's bright blue. Then more boats showed up over the next few days, and more people threw fruit for William to eat, even a cabbage once. Everything was delicious, and William did tricks for the people. They had even set up a camp on the riverbank to watch him all the time. It felt so important he didn't even see the big boat behind him with the net. On the outskirts of Zambia's largest city, there's a wildlife preserve named Lusaka National Park. This park has seen visitors from all over the globe, as they have the most special hippo in the world living in residence, William, the blue hippopotamus, a national icon and a world-famous attraction. He's made the park famous. He's a gorgeous cerulean blue with hints of turquoise around his ears and tail. His care providers spoil him with all manners of fruits and vegetables, and he still does tricks for the people, but only on occasion. William is an old hippo now, you see. He's been at the park for many years. He spends most of his time now staring at the Lungwa River map on his enclosure wall with a faraway look in his eyes. His keeper is worried that William is homesick, but doesn't quite know what to do about it. He still smiles and puffs his chest out in pride at the knowledge that there are parks and zoos throughout the world that also have special young hippos, some of them his children, and are a bright, brilliant blue. He's traveled the world, been a celebrity and a father. He's been studied by the most prestigious scientists and biologists, and no one ever discovered why he was blue. But William knew the truth. In his heart, he smiled and thought it was all worth it. Even though he lost his first family, he gained a new one. He finally understood that with every wish granted, there was a cost. The legend of the blue water lilies was true. They were indeed magic. So that's all I have for you this week, and I appreciate you stopping by and listening to the stories. And I'll be back again next week with more stories and poems. Sláinte. Guramahagat. Thank you for listening to the show today. I hope you enjoyed the variety of stories and poems again this week. If you like the show, please like, subscribe, and reply, as this goes a long way towards reaching more listeners around the world. As a Shanke, I hope you will allow me to continue delighting you with a story or poem here under the crown of beatha. Maybe they will bring you a smile, take you away from your troubles for a time. As I say goodbye this week, I wish to leave you with this Irish blessing as you go about your day. May your path rise up to meet you, and the sun warm your bonnet as you walk down the lane to the pub. May your friends and relations bring you a pint after you retell these stories and poems I give you here. Slán go fóill. Goodbye for now.